That's just a little spark. The fire's coming.
The thing about discovering your wife's affair through 87 missed calls is that it really puts your marriage into perspective. I'm Dave Harlan, 38 years old, union electrician, and apparently the last person in Lakeview to know my wife Monica has been screwing her real estate colleague Greg Tully in every house she's supposed to be showing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me paint you the picture of my perfect suburban nightmare first. It started 3 months ago with Monica's sudden case of chronic headaches. Every night, like clockwork. Not tonight, Dave. I have a splitting headache. Then she'd pop 2 Advil and scroll through her phone for another hour, giggling at text messages she never shared. My body, my choice, Dave. You have no right to expect anything, she'd say when I tried to talk about it. Real romantic, right? Should have put that on our wedding invitations instead of till death do us part. Monica Harlan, 35, local real estate queen bee, had always been the charismatic one in our relationship. Perfect blonde hair, perfect smile, perfect way of making everyone else feel like they were lucky to be in her presence. Me? I'm the guy who fixes the electrical problems in the houses she sells. Not exactly glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps our 12-year-old daughter Ellie in soccer cleats and art supplies. Ellie's the only good thing to come out of this marriage, and she's got more sense than both her parents combined. Kid sees everything, says little, but her eyes miss nothing. She's been watching Monica's late-night phone sessions, too, I can tell. The missed calls happened on a Tuesday. Monica had stormed out after another one of our discussions about intimacy, slamming the door so hard our neighbor Mrs. Rausch's porch light flickered on. Mrs. Rausch sees everything that happens on Maple Street and has opinions about all of it. I was in my garage, rewiring an old radio, when my phone started buzzing. Monica's name flashing on the screen over and over. 87 times in 2 hours. Each call lasting exactly 1 ring before going to voicemail. The voicemails were interesting. Monica's voice, but not talking to me. Background conversations, car doors slamming. A man's voice I recognized as Greg Tully saying, "Just hang up, Monica. He doesn't need to know we're here." Here. Where was here? That's when I found Monica's other phone. Hidden in her jewelry box, underneath the earrings I bought her for our anniversary that she never wears. A cheap prepaid cell, and let me tell you, the text messages on that thing were educational. Monica and Greg had been very creative in their descriptions of what they wanted to do to each other, and very specific about how boring and inadequate I apparently was in bed. "Dave probably thinks foreplay is asking if I'm ready," one message read. Greg's response included several laughing emojis and a suggestion about what they could do at his cabin that weekend. His cabin. The work retreat Monica had mentioned, the one I wasn't invited to because it was just for the real estate team. I sat in that garage for 3 hours, reading every message, looking at every photo they'd sent each other. Some were taken in our house, in our bedroom, while I was at work. Monica wearing lingerie I'd never seen before, posing for another man in the bed where I slept every night. The rage that built up in me wasn't the hot, explosive kind you see in movies. It was cold, calculating. Like the methodical way I approach electrical problems. Find the short circuit, trace it back to its source, then fix it permanently. Pete Morrison, my oldest friend and fellow electrician, found me there at midnight, still staring at that phone. "Jesus, Dave, you look like you've seen a ghost," he said, settling his bulk onto my workbench. Pete's got the kind of dry humor that comes from 30 years of dealing with other people's electrical disasters. I showed him the phone. Pete whistled low and long. "Well, crap. How long you think this has been going on?" "Based on the messages, at least 6 months, maybe longer. What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? The old Dave would have confronted Monica directly, probably would have ended up in a screaming match that woke the whole neighborhood. But looking at those messages, seeing how they laughed about my boring ways and performance issues, something darker took root. "I'm going to make them wish they'd never met each other," I said. Pete raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just thorough, like a good electrical job." The next morning, Monica came home acting like nothing had happened. Made coffee, kissed Ellie goodbye for school, even gave me a peck on the cheek that felt like ice. "Sorry about last night," she said. "I just needed some air." "No problem. How's the work retreat planning going?" Her smile didn't waver, but I caught the tiny pause. "Great. Really looking forward to it. Greg thinks it'll be very productive." I bet he does. If she caught the edge in my voice, she didn't show it. Monica had always been good at hearing only what she wanted to hear. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I called in a favor with my buddy Jake, who runs a security company. Jake owed me for rewiring his office for free, and he was happy to lend me some equipment. Just want to keep an eye on things while Monica's away, I told him. Sure thing, Dave. How many cameras you need? Enough to cover every angle. Greg Tully's cabin sat on the north shore of Crystal Lake, about 90 minutes from Lakeview. I'd been there once before for a company barbecue 3 years ago. Greg had made sure everyone knew how much the place cost him, how it was his sanctuary from the suburban grind. Now it was going to be his downfall. Monica left Friday morning with a suitcase that seemed awfully large for a work retreat. She'd spent an hour getting ready, putting on makeup and perfume like she was going to a wedding instead of a business meeting. "Don't wait up," she said, giving me another one of those ice-cold kisses. "We'll probably work late into the night." "I'm sure you will." Ellie watched from the kitchen doorway, eating cereal and studying her mother with those sharp 12-year-old eyes that missed nothing. "Dad," she said after Monica left, "Mom's acting weird." "How so, kiddo?" "She's happy, like really happy. She hasn't been happy around us in months." Out of the mouths of babes. I waited until noon, then loaded my truck with Jake's surveillance equipment and hit the road. Pete sat in the passenger seat, armed with coffee and the kind of grim determination that comes from watching your best friend get betrayed. "You sure about this?" he asked as we turned onto the lake road. "I'm sure I need to know what I'm dealing with before I make my next move." The cabin was exactly as I remembered it. Rustic logs and stone, big windows facing the water, Greg's ridiculous red Corvette parked in the driveway next to Monica's SUV. There were 2 other cars I didn't recognize, probably belonging to Monica's real estate friends, who were apparently in on this charade. We parked a quarter mile down the road and hiked through the woods. Jake's equipment was military-grade stuff, tiny cameras with incredible range and clarity. I placed them strategically around the cabin's perimeter, focusing on the main living areas visible through those big windows. What I saw through the camera feeds made my blood boil. Monica, Greg, and 3 other people from their real estate office were having a party, not a work retreat. Champagne, loud music, and Monica draped all over Greg like a teenager. She was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, something that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. But it was the conversation I overheard that really set me off. "I can't believe Dave hasn't figured it out yet," Monica was saying, her voice slightly slurred from champagne. "He's so oblivious. Last week I told him I was showing houses until 10 p.m., and he just nodded and went back to his stupid electrical magazines." "Maybe he knows and just doesn't care," suggested Carla Peterson, one of Monica's closest friends and fellow realtor. "Some guys are into that loser thing." The group erupted in laughter. Monica nearly spilled her drink. "Trust me, Dave's not that sophisticated. He thinks romance is asking if I want the lights on or off." More laughter. Greg pulled Monica closer and whispered something in her ear that made her giggle and swatted him playfully. "When are you going to tell him?" asked Jamie Walsh, another member of Monica's inner circle. "After I get the house appraised and figure out the custody situation," Monica replied, suddenly serious. "My lawyer says I can probably get full custody of Ellie if I play it right. Dave's work schedule is crazy, and I can make a case that he's never around." My hands were shaking as I adjusted the camera angle. Pete put a steadying hand on my shoulder. "Easy, brother. We're gathering intelligence here. She wants to take Ellie." I heard, but getting mad won't help Ellie. Getting smart will... He was right, as usual. I forced myself to keep listening, to document everything. Greg stood up and raised his glass. "To Monica, for finally deciding to upgrade from basic cable to premium service." The toast was followed by more laughter and applause. Monica stood up too, swaying slightly. "To Greg, for showing me what I've been missing all these years. Who knew real estate could be so stimulating?" They kissed, long and deep, while their friends cheered. I watched my wife of 15 years celebrate the end of our marriage with the man who'd been screwing her in our bed. That's when I decided passive observation wasn't enough. I sent Pete back to the truck and spent the next hour setting up a few surprises around Greg's property. Nothing dangerous or illegal, just some creative applications of my electrical skills. Greg's outdoor sound system, his fancy barbecue grill, even his hot tub. All of them were about to develop some interesting malfunctions. The first surprise came when Greg tried to fire up the grill for dinner. Instead of the usual blue flame, it produced a spectacular shower of sparks and a sound like a dying moose. Greg jumped back, cursing, while Monica and her friends scattered. "What the heck?" Greg muttered, poking at the grill with a long fork. The second surprise happened when someone tried to turn on the outdoor speakers. Instead of music, they got a recording I'd made earlier, a loop of Greg's own voice saying, "Monica's husband is so boring," over and over again at maximum volume. Chaos erupted. Greg ran around frantically, trying to find the source of the sound while Monica shouted at him to fix it. Their friends were laughing so hard they could barely stand up. The third surprise was my personal favorite. When Greg finally managed to shut off the speakers and everyone decided to relax in the hot tub, they discovered that the water had been dyed bright pink. Not harmful, just embarrassing, especially when Greg's white swim trunks turned the same shade of pink as a flamingo. "This is sabotage," Greg announced, standing in the pink water looking like an angry cotton candy machine. "Someone's messing with us." "Who would do that?" Monica asked, but her eyes were scanning the tree line like she already suspected. "Your husband, maybe?" "Dave, he doesn't have the imagination for something like this." "Wrong again, sweetheart." I was about to call it a night when headlights swept across the cabin's driveway. A silver Mercedes pulled up, and out stepped Sarah Tully, Greg's wife of 22 years. This was about to get very interesting. Sarah Tully was not supposed to be at the cabin. I knew this because I'd heard Greg tell Monica that Sarah was visiting her sister in Milwaukee for the weekend. Apparently, Greg's intelligence was as unreliable as his marriage vows. Sarah walked up to the cabin with the determined stride of a woman who'd had enough. She was 52, elegant in that way that comes from money and good breeding, and currently radiating the kind of fury that makes smart men run for cover. Unfortunately for Greg, he'd never been accused of being smart. I watched through my cameras as Sarah opened the cabin door without knocking. The sound of her heels on the hardwood floor cut through the music and laughter like a blade. "Gregory, I think we need to talk." The silence that followed was deafening. Through the window, I could see Monica frozen in the pink hot tub water, her champagne glass halfway to her lips. Greg looked like he'd seen his own ghost. "Sarah, what are you... I thought you were in Milwaukee." "I was, until your neighbor called to tell me about the party you were throwing at our cabin. Imagine my surprise when she mentioned seeing Monica Harlan's car in our driveway." Greg climbed out of the hot tub, pink water dripping from his swim trunks, looking like the world's most pathetic superhero. "I can explain. I'm sure you can. You always have such creative explanations." Sarah's voice was ice-cold calm, which somehow made it more terrifying than screaming would have been. "Is this the work retreat you told me about?" Monica finally found her voice. "Sarah, this isn't what it looks like." "Really? Because it looks like you're screwing my husband in my hot tub while your own husband thinks you're at a business meeting." Carla and Jamie, Monica's loyal friends, suddenly discovered they had urgent business elsewhere. They gathered their things and headed for the door with the speed of rats abandoning a sinking ship. "Don't leave on my account," Sarah called after them. "I'm sure you have wonderful insights about marriage and fidelity to share." The door slammed behind them, leaving just the four adults in what had to be the most awkward scene in the history of adultery. I decided this was my cue to make an appearance. Walking up to the cabin's front door felt surreal, like I was entering a play where I didn't know my lines. But when Sarah opened the door, her expression told me she'd been expecting me. "You must be Dave," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Sarah. I believe our spouses have been getting to know each other quite well." "So I've noticed." Monica and Greg were scrambling to get dressed, both talking at once, trying to explain the unexplainable. I ignored them and focused on Sarah. "How long have you known?" I asked her. "About 6 months. I hired a private investigator after I found some interesting charges on Greg's credit card. Hotel rooms, restaurants, jewelry purchases that never made it home to me." She smiled, but it was sharp enough to cut glass. "What about you?" "Found out 3 days ago. Been doing some investigating of my own. The pink hot tub was a nice touch." "Thank you, I thought so." Monica finally managed to get her dress back on and stormed over to us. "Dave, what the heck are you doing here? And what did you do to Greg's property?" "Just some minor electrical work. Nothing permanent." I looked at Greg, who was still struggling with his pants. "Though I'd recommend having a professional check your wiring. Seems like there might be some dangerous shorts in the system." Greg's face turned red. "You had no right to come here and sabotage my property." And you had no right to screw my wife, but here we are. Sarah laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. Oh, I like him already. This is insane, Monica said. Dave, we need to talk. Privately. I think we're past private conversations, don't you? Besides, Sarah and I are just getting acquainted. Turns out we have a lot in common. What happened next was the kind of argument that legends are made of. Monica and Greg tried to justify their affair. Sarah and I systematically destroyed every excuse they offered, and the whole thing devolved into the kind of screaming match that probably scared wildlife for miles around. Monica accused me of being boring, inattentive, and emotionally unavailable. I countered with evidence of her lies, her manipulation, and her plan to steal my daughter. Greg tried to play the "it just happened" card until Sarah produced a folder full of photographs showing their affair had been going on for almost a year. It just happened? Sarah repeated, flipping through pictures of Greg and Monica at restaurants, hotels, and various real estate properties. 43 times? It just happened 43 times. The number hit Monica like a physical blow. She'd obviously had no idea Sarah had been documenting everything. You hired a private investigator, Monica said weakly. I hired the best private investigator money can buy. Did you know there are photographs of you two in the Marriott downtown? The same hotel where Greg and I spent our honeymoon? Greg looked like he wanted to disappear into the cabin's floorboards. Sarah, I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go exactly? Just a little adultery? Just a small betrayal? I found myself genuinely impressed by Sarah's composure. She was systematically dismantling both of them with the precision of a surgeon, never raising her voice, never losing control. Dave, Monica tried one last time. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. Fix what exactly? You're lying? You're cheating? Your plan to take Ellie away from me? Her face went white. How did you... I know about the lawyer, Monica. I know about the custody strategy. I know about all of it. The fight went out of her then, like air leaving a punctured balloon. She sank onto Greg's expensive leather couch and put her head in her hands. What do you want? She asked quietly. Sarah and I exchanged glances. I could see the same cold calculation in her eyes that I felt in my own heart. We want justice, Sarah said, and we want everyone in Lakeview to know exactly what kind of people you really are. That's when Monica and Greg realized they weren't dealing with heartbroken spouses anymore. They were dealing with enemies who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain from their destruction. The real war was about to begin. The thing about small towns like Lakeview is that reputation is everything. Your credit rating, your job prospects, your social standing, even your property values, they all depend on what your neighbors think of you. Monica and Greg had built their entire lives on being the golden couple of the local real estate scene. They were about to learn what happens when that golden image gets tarnished beyond repair. Sarah and I spent the rest of the weekend planning our campaign. She had resources I could only dream of: money, connections, and a private investigator's worth of documented evidence. I had something equally valuable: intimate knowledge of how Monica's mind worked and a deep understanding of the local social network. The key is to control the narrative, Sarah explained as we sat in her Mercedes outside a Denny's halfway between the cabin and Lakeview. Monica and Greg will try to spin this as a love story, two people who couldn't help themselves. We need to make sure everyone sees it as what it really is: betrayal, manipulation, and lies. Monica's weakness is her ego, I said. She can't stand being seen as anything less than perfect. If we can make her look foolish in public, she'll lose control and make mistakes. And Greg? Greg's a coward. The minute things get uncomfortable, he'll try to throw Monica under the bus to save himself. Sarah smiled. Perfect. Let's give them something to be uncomfortable about. Our first target was the real estate office where Monica and Greg worked. Pinnacle Properties was the most prestigious agency in Lakeview, and their owner, Robert Chen, had built his reputation on family values and community trust. He was not going to be happy when he found out two of his top agents had been using company properties for their affair. Monday morning, Sarah and I walked into Pinnacle Properties, carrying a manila envelope full of photographs and documented evidence. The receptionist, a sweet grandmother named Mrs. Patterson, recognized me immediately. Dave, how nice to see you. Are you here to see Monica? Actually, we're here to see Mr. Chen. It's about Monica. Robert Chen was a small, precise man who took pride in running a clean business. When Sarah laid out the photographs on his desk, Images of Monica and Greg in various company-listed properties, clearly not conducting business. His face went through several interesting color changes. These were taken in houses that were supposed to be empty, he said quietly. Houses that my agency was responsible for. That's correct, Sarah replied. My husband and your employee have been using your listings as their personal love nest for almost a year. Chen picked up one photograph that showed Monica and Greg in a particularly compromising position in what was obviously a luxury home's master bedroom. This is the Riverside property. We had 3 showings scheduled that day. According to my investigator's notes, they were there for 2 hours. I hope they at least locked the door. Chen's hands were shaking slightly as he gathered up the photographs. I need to speak with both of them immediately. I'm afraid that might be difficult, I said. Monica called in sick this morning, and Greg seems to have taken an unscheduled personal day. Which was true. After the confrontation at the cabin, both of them had apparently decided they needed time to regroup. Unfortunately for them, Sarah and I were just getting started. Our second stop was the Lakeview Community Center, where Monica served on the board of directors for the annual summer festival. The festival was Lakeview's biggest social event, and Monica had been planning it for months. She'd made sure everyone knew how hard she was working, how dedicated she was to making it the best festival ever. Board President Jennifer Walsh, no relation to Jamie, thankfully, was a formidable woman who'd been running community events since before I was born. She listened to our story with the kind of stern attention that reminded me of my high school principal. So you're telling me that Monica has been lying to her husband, lying to her employer, and potentially exposing the festival to liability issues because of her personal conduct? That's exactly what we're telling you, Sarah confirmed. And we have documentation to prove all of it. Jennifer's expression could have frozen water. The festival depends on community trust and family participation. If word gets out that one of our board members has been conducting herself inappropriately, word's going to get out regardless, I said. The question is whether the festival distances itself from Monica before or after it becomes a scandal. Jennifer was already reaching for her phone. I'll call an emergency board meeting for tonight. By Tuesday morning, Monica and Greg's world was crumbling. Chen had fired them both. The festival board had voted Monica off the committee, and word was starting to spread through Lakeview's tightly connected social network. Monica called me 17 times that day. I let every call go to voicemail. Dave, please, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand. People are saying horrible things about me. Mrs. Rausch won't even look at me when I drive by. Mrs. Rausch, not looking at you, was social death in our neighborhood. The woman was the unofficial information hub for 3 city blocks. The 18th call came while I was having dinner with Ellie. My daughter had been watching the situation unfold with the sharp intelligence that made me proud and worried in equal measure. Are you going to answer it? She asked, nodding toward my buzzing phone. What do you think I should do? Ellie considered this seriously. I think Mom made her choice when she decided to lie to us. Maybe she should live with the consequences. 12 years old, and she already understood justice better than most adults. I answered the phone. Dave, thank God. Listen, we need to meet. I can explain everything. I think you've explained enough already, Monica. The whole town is getting a pretty clear picture of who you really are. That's not fair. You're destroying my reputation based on a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Is that what we're calling it now? I made a mistake, okay? I made a mistake. And now you're trying to ruin my entire life. No, Monica, you ruined your life. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Gone was the pleading, apologetic tone. In its place was something harder, more calculating. You want to play hardball, Dave? Fine. But remember, I know things about you too. I know about the drinking after work. I know about the money you've been hiding from me, and I know how to make a jury believe that Ellie isn't safe in your custody. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you. Back off, or I'll make sure you lose everything that matters to you. I looked at Ellie, who was pretending to focus on her homework, but obviously listening to every word. My daughter, the one good thing in my life, the one person I'd do anything to protect. Bring it on, I said, and hung up. Ellie looked up from her math problems. Dad, are you okay? I'm fine, kiddo, but I think things are about to get interesting. That turned out to be the understatement of the century. Monica's threat about custody lit a fire under me that I didn't know existed. The idea that she might take Ellie away from me, especially after everything she'd done, was unacceptable. But I also knew that Monica was dangerous when cornered, and she had a lawyer who specialized in making innocent men look like monsters. I needed insurance. Wednesday morning, I called Jake's security company and had him install a complete surveillance system in our house. Cameras in every common area, audio recording in the living room and kitchen, everything legally admissible and properly disclosed. If Monica was going to try to frame me as an unfit father, she was going to have to do it on camera. The system went live just in time. Monica showed up Thursday evening with her lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Hendricks, who had a reputation for destroying fathers in custody battles. They brought papers, a restraining order petition, a motion for emergency custody, and a list of allegations that would have been impressive if they weren't complete fiction. According to Monica's sworn statement, I was an alcoholic who'd been hiding money from the family and had recently become increasingly unstable and threatening. She claimed I'd been neglecting Ellie, leaving her alone for hours while I drank in the garage, and had even threatened physical violence during our recent conversations. "This is creative writing," I told Patricia Hendricks as I read through the documents. "You should submit this for a fiction award." "My client is genuinely concerned for her daughter's safety," Hendricks replied smoothly. "She's documented a pattern of behavior that suggests you're not capable of providing a stable home environment." "What pattern? What documentation?" Monica spoke up for the first time since they'd arrived. "The drinking, Dave. Every night after work, you disappear into that garage with a six-pack. Sometimes you don't come back inside until after midnight. I work on electronics in the garage. It's a hobby. While drinking. I have a beer or two while I work. That's not alcoholism. That's relaxation. And the money you've been hiding?" I had to give her credit for that one. I did have a separate savings account that Monica didn't know about. But it wasn't hidden assets. It was Ellie's college fund, something I'd been building for years by doing side jobs and saving every extra dollar I could find. "You mean Ellie's college fund? The one I've been contributing to since she was born?" Monica's confidence faltered slightly. "You never told me about any college fund." "I never told you about a lot of things. Doesn't make them illegal." Patricia Hendricks sensed her client was on shaky ground and tried to redirect. "Regardless of the money issue, there's still the question of your recent behavior. Monica says you've been making threats, acting erratically. Define erratically. Following her to private locations, vandalizing property, making threatening phone calls. I followed my wife to her boyfriend's cabin because I suspected she was lying to me. Turns out I was right. As for vandalism, I think Greg's pink hot tub was more of an artistic statement." "You admit to the vandalism?" "I admit to adding food coloring to water. If that's vandalism, every kid who's ever made Kool-Aid is a criminal." Hendricks was getting frustrated. She'd obviously expected me to be intimidated by the legal papers and formal accusations. Instead, I was calmly dismantling every allegation while my hidden cameras recorded everything. "Mr. Harlan, my client is prepared to be reasonable. If you agree to supervised visitation and anger management counseling, we can probably work out an arrangement that doesn't involve a lengthy court battle. And if I don't agree, then we'll let a judge decide what's best for Ellie." I looked at Monica, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. She was still beautiful, still charismatic, but there was something desperate in her eyes now, something that told me she was bluffing. "You know what? Let's do that. Let's let a judge decide." Monica's face went white. "Dave, you don't understand what you're up against. I have evidence. I have witnesses." "What witnesses?" "Carla and Jamie saw how you've been acting. They'll testify about your drinking, your threats, your unstable behavior." I almost laughed. Carla and Jamie, the same women who'd fled the cabin like their hair was on fire when Sarah showed up. The same women who'd been encouraging Monica's affair and helping her lie to me for months. "Those are the witnesses you're counting on? The women who helped you cheat on me? They're respected members of the community. They're accomplices to adultery. I'm sure a judge will find their testimony very credible." Patricia Hendricks gathered up her papers with the efficiency of someone who knew when a case was falling apart. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Harlan. I suggest you use the time to reconsider your position." After they left, I found Ellie sitting at the top of the stairs. She'd obviously heard everything. "Dad, am I going to have to live with Mom?" I sat down next to her on the steps. "Not if I have anything to say about it, kiddo." "Good, because I don't want to live with someone who lies all the time." Out of the mouths of babes. Friday morning brought a new development. Sarah called with news that Greg had filed for divorce and was claiming that Monica had seduced him, that he'd been an unwilling participant in the affair who'd been manipulated by her predatory behavior. "He's actually trying to claim he was the victim," Sarah said, and I could hear the disbelief in her voice. According to his filing, Monica pursued him relentlessly, threatened to ruin his career if he didn't sleep with her, and manipulated him into the affair through emotional blackmail. That's ridiculous. Of course it's ridiculous, but it's also smart. If he can convince a judge that he was coerced, he might be able to keep some of his assets and avoid paying me alimony. What about the photographs your investigator took? Don't they show him as a willing participant? They show him participating. Whether he was willing or coerced is a matter of interpretation. This was getting complicated. Monica and Greg, former lovers and co-conspirators, were now turning on each other with the viciousness of wounded animals. Each was trying to save themselves by destroying the other, and both were dragging innocent people into their war. That's when I decided it was time to stop playing defense and go on the attack. The Lakeview Summer Festival was scheduled for the following weekend. It would be the biggest gathering of local residents all year, with hundreds of families, dozens of local businesses, and extensive media coverage. Monica had been planning to use the festival as a platform to rebuild her reputation, to show everyone that she was still the same community-minded person they'd always known. I had other plans for the festival. Sarah and I spent Friday afternoon preparing what we called the Monica exhibit, a comprehensive display of Monica and Greg's affair, complete with photographs, timeline, and documentation of all the lies they'd told. We set it up like a professional presentation, the kind of thing you might see at a business conference or academic symposium. The only difference was that this presentation was going to destroy two people's lives. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, perfect festival weather. I loaded my truck with display boards, a portable sound system, and enough copies of our documentation to supply half the town. Sarah met me at the festival grounds with her own supplies and a grim smile that reminded me of a shark catching the scent of weakness in the water. "Ready to do this?" she asked. "More than ready." The festival officially opened at 10 a.m. By 10:15, Monica and Greg's dirty laundry was on full display for everyone in Lakeview to see. The Lakeview Summer Festival had always been Monica's favorite event. She loved being the center of attention, loved having everyone see her as the perfect wife and mother who somehow found time to volunteer for every good cause in town. She'd spent months planning this year's festival, making sure every detail was perfect, every vendor was happy, every family had a good time. She was about to have the worst day of her life. Sarah and I had arrived early, before the official opening, and set up our display in the prime location Monica had reserved for the Community Appreciation booth. By the time the first families started arriving, we had a professional-looking presentation that would have made any museum curator proud. The centerpiece was a timeline titled, "The Monica and Greg Show, A Year of Lies." It started with the first documented evidence of their affair and continued through to the previous week's legal threats. Every major event was illustrated with photographs, text messages, and witness statements. It was comprehensive, devastating, and absolutely factual. The crowd started gathering around 9:30, drawn by the professional appearance of our display. At first, people were just curious. They recognized the photos of Monica and Greg, but couldn't quite figure out what they were looking at. Then Mrs. Rausch arrived. Mrs. Rausch had the kind of reading glasses that made everything look larger and more dramatic. She studied our timeline with the intensity of a detective examining evidence, her expression growing more shocked with each revelation. "Oh my," she said loudly enough for everyone within 50 feet to hear. "Oh my goodness." That was all it took. Within minutes, we had a crowd of 30 people reading our display, their voices rising in surprise, anger, and what I can only describe as delicious scandal-mongering excitement. "I knew something was going on," declared Betty Martinez, who lived 2 streets over from us. "Monica's been acting strange for months." "Look at this," said Tom Wilson, pointing to a photograph of Monica and Greg at the Riverside property. "That's the house I was thinking about buying. They were supposed to show it to me that day, but Monica canceled at the last minute." "Said she had a family emergency," added his wife Carol. "Guess we know what kind of emergency it was?" The crowd kept growing. By 10 a.m., when the festival officially opened, we had nearly 100 people gathered around our display. The buzz of conversation was getting louder, more animated, as people shared their own stories about Monica and Greg's suspicious behavior. That's when Monica arrived. She was dressed for success. Crisp white blouse, navy skirt, perfect hair and makeup. She'd obviously spent considerable time preparing for what she thought would be her triumphant return to public life. Instead, she walked into her own public execution. The crowd parted as she approached, creating a clear path to our display. I watched her face as she realized what she was looking at, saw the exact moment when her composure cracked. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet crowd. "It's the truth," I replied. "Something you've been having trouble with lately." Monica's eyes swept over the timeline, the photographs, the documented evidence of her lies. Her face went through several color changes, white to red to purple, and back to white again. "You can't do this," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "This is private information." "Actually, it's all public record now," Sarah interjected, stepping out from behind the display. "Court documents, business records, publicly accessible information. Nothing here violates anyone's privacy." Monica spun around to face Sarah, and I saw real hatred flash in her eyes. "You did this. You destroyed my marriage, and now you're trying to destroy my life." "I destroyed your marriage?" Sarah's voice was ice-cold calm. "I think you have me confused with someone else. Someone who was sleeping with my husband in my hot tub." The crowd was eating this up. Nothing like a good public confrontation to make a festival memorable. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, raising my voice to address the growing audience, "if I could have your attention for a moment." The crowd quieted, sensing something big was about to happen. Most of you know me. Dave Harlan, local electrician, Ellie's dad, Monica's soon-to-be ex-husband. Some of you might have heard rumors about recent events in my family. I thought it was important to set the record straight. I gestured toward our display. Everything you see here is documented fact. For the past year, my wife Monica and her colleague Greg Tully have been conducting an affair. They've used company properties, lied to their spouses, their employers, and their friends. They've violated professional ethics, broken marriage vows, and betrayed the trust of everyone who believed in them. Monica tried to interrupt, but I continued. More importantly, Monica has been planning to take my daughter away from me based on false accusations and manufactured evidence. She's tried to paint me as an unfit father while conducting herself in a manner that would make a soap opera writer blush. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. "I'm not asking you to take sides in my divorce. I'm not asking you to judge Monica or Greg any more harshly than their actions warrant. I'm just asking you to remember that actions have consequences, and that the truth has a way of coming out eventually." I paused, looking directly at Monica. "The truth is that my wife chose to destroy our family for a cheap thrill with a married man. The truth is that she's been lying to everyone in this town for months. And the truth is that she's now trying to use our daughter as a tool in a custody battle based on accusations she knows are false." Monica's composure finally shattered completely. "You bastard!" she screamed. "You self-righteous bastard! You think you're so perfect, but you're just a boring electrician who couldn't keep his wife satisfied." The crowd gasped. Even by Lakeview standards, that was a spectacular public meltdown. "You're right," I said calmly. "I am just a boring electrician. But I'm a boring electrician who never cheated on his wife, never lied to his daughter, and never tried to destroy someone's life out of spite." That's when Greg showed up. He'd obviously heard about our display from someone in the crowd and had rushed over to do damage control. Unfortunately for him, he arrived just in time to hear Monica's public breakdown and see the entire town staring at photographic evidence of his infidelity. "This is harassment," he announced, trying to project authority but mostly sounding desperate. "This is a public festival, not a place for personal vendettas." "You're absolutely right," Sarah said, stepping forward to confront her husband. "This is a public festival, a family event, the kind of place where people come to celebrate community values and trust." She gestured toward the display. "Tell me, Greg, which of these community values were you celebrating when you were screwing Monica in other people's houses?" The crowd was riveted. This was better than cable television. Greg's face turned red. "Sarah, we can discuss this privately." We tried discussing it privately. For 6 months, I tried to give you the chance to end this affair and save our marriage. Instead, you chose to continue lying to me, to your clients, and to everyone else in town. Monica, meanwhile, was frantically trying to remove photographs from our display. Several people in the crowd moved to stop her, creating a minor scuffle that drew even more attention. "These are stolen property," she claimed. "You had no right to take these pictures." "Actually," said a new voice from the back of the crowd, Those pictures were taken by a licensed private investigator in the course of a legitimate investigation. They're completely legal. Everyone turned to see Patricia Hendricks, Monica's lawyer, pushing through the crowd. She looked like she'd rather be anywhere else on earth. "Patricia," Monica said with obvious relief. "Tell them they have to take this down." Hendricks studied our display with the careful attention of someone who knew exactly how much trouble her client was in. "I can't do that, Monica. This is all public information, legally obtained and legally displayed. They have every right to present it." Monica stared at her lawyer in disbelief. "What do you mean you can't do that? Isn't this defamation or harassment or something?" "It's only defamation if it's false. Is any of this false?" The silence that followed was deafening. Monica looked around at the crowd of her neighbors and former friends, all waiting for her answer. She started, then stopped. "I need to go." She pushed through the crowd and hurried toward the parking lot, leaving Greg to face the music alone. He stood there for a moment, looking like a man who just realized he was standing in the middle of a minefield. "This isn't over," he said finally, but it sounded more like wishful thinking than a threat. "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's been over since the moment you decided to betray your wife and help destroy my family. You just didn't realize it yet." Greg followed Monica toward the parking lot, leaving Sarah and me standing in front of our display with a crowd of very entertained neighbors. "Well," said Mrs. Rausch, "this has been the most interesting festival in 20 years. The crowd gradually dispersed, but people kept coming back throughout the day to look at our display and ask questions. By evening, I estimated that half the town had seen our presentation, and the other half had heard about it from someone who had. Monica and Greg's reputations were destroyed, their careers were over, and their legal positions were hopeless. But more importantly, everyone in Lakeview now knew the truth about what had happened to my family. As we packed up our display at the end of the day, Sarah turned to me with a satisfied smile. "Think that did the trick?" "I think that was just the beginning." I was right. The real fireworks were still to come. The week after the festival was the kind of quiet that comes before a tornado. Monica and Greg had essentially disappeared from public view, their phones going straight to voicemail, their houses dark at night. Word around town was that Greg had moved into a cheap motel on the highway, while Monica was staying with her sister in the next county. I should have been satisfied. Their reputations were destroyed, their careers were over, and my custody case was looking stronger every day. Patricia Hendricks had quietly withdrawn from representing Monica, and the restraining order petition had been dropped without explanation. But I knew Monica too well to think she'd give up that easily. She was planning something, and when cornered animals get desperate, they get dangerous. The answer came on a Thursday night, 2 weeks after the festival. I was in the garage working on an old radio when I heard car doors slamming in the driveway. Not one car, multiple cars. Through the window, I could see Monica's SUV, Greg's Corvette, and 2 other vehicles I didn't recognize. This was either a very awkward social visit or the beginning of something much worse. I activated the security system Jake had installed, making sure every camera was recording, then walked to the front door. Monica was standing on the porch with Greg, Carla, Jamie, and 2 men I'd never seen before. Everyone looked tense, desperate, and slightly unhinged. "We need to talk," Monica announced when I opened the door. "I think we've said everything we need to say to each other." "No, we haven't. You've destroyed our lives, Dave. You've made it impossible for us to work, to live in this town, to have any kind of future. And for what? Because your feelings got hurt? Because you cheated on me, lied to our daughter, and tried to steal my custody rights based on false accusations." "Those accusations weren't false," Greg interjected. "You're unstable, Dave. Look at what you've done to us. Look at the lengths you've gone to for revenge." I studied the group on my porch. They all had the same desperate energy, the same cornered animal look in their eyes. Whatever they were planning, they'd convinced themselves it was justified. "What do you want?" I asked. "We want you to fix this," Monica said. "We want you to tell everyone that you made it all up, that the affair never happened, that you fabricated everything out of jealousy and spite." I almost laughed. "You want me to lie about your affair? The same affair that was documented by a private investigator and witnessed by half the town?" "We want you to admit that you're mentally unstable and that you've been harassing us," Carla said. "We want you to check yourself into a psychiatric facility for treatment." Now I did laugh. "That's your plan?" I'm supposed to admit to being crazy and have myself committed. It's not crazy, Jamie added. It's the truth. Look at what you've done. The stalking, the vandalism, the public humiliation. That's not normal behavior. Neither is adultery, but that didn't stop you from encouraging it. One of the men I didn't recognize stepped forward. He was big, muscled, with the kind of face that suggested he solved problems with his fists rather than his brain. Maybe you need some help understanding the situation, he said. And you are? I'm someone who helps people when they're having trouble communicating. I looked at Monica. Really? You brought muscle to threaten me at my own house? In front of the security cameras that are recording everything? Monica's confidence faltered slightly. What security cameras? The ones Jake installed last week. The ones that have been recording this entire conversation. The ones that just captured your friend here threatening me with physical violence. The big man looked around nervously, suddenly aware that he might be on camera making threats. This is your last chance, Dave, Greg said, trying to regain control of the situation. Either you fix this mess you've made, or we'll fix it for you. How exactly do you plan to do that? We'll make sure everyone knows what you really are, Monica said. We'll tell them about your drinking, your violence, your mental instability. We'll make sure you lose your job, your friends, your daughter. With what evidence? More false accusations? With testimony from people who've seen your behavior firsthand, Carla said. People who've witnessed your threats, your harassment, your drinking. You mean the same people who helped Monica cheat on me? The same people who are facing their own legal problems for aiding and abetting adultery. The group exchanged glances. They were obviously running out of options and getting more desperate by the minute. That's when Monica played her last card. If you don't do what we're asking, she said quietly, something might happen to Ellie. The world went very still. I could hear my own heartbeat, could feel the adrenaline flooding my system like electricity through a wire. What did you just say? I said something might happen to Ellie. Accidents happen all the time. Kids get hurt. Sometimes parents aren't there to protect them. The big man shifted uncomfortably. Even he seemed to realize that threatening a child crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed. You just threatened my daughter, I said, my voice deadly calm. On camera, in front of witnesses. Monica's face went white as she realized what she'd just done. I didn't threaten anyone. I just said accidents happen. No, you threatened to hurt my child if I didn't cooperate with your extortion scheme. That's a felony, Monica. Several felonies, actually. I pulled out my phone and dialed emergency, keeping my eyes on the group on my porch. Emergency? What's your emergency? This is Dave Harlan at 247 Maple Street. I have 6 people on my property who have just threatened to harm my daughter if I don't comply with their demands. I need police assistance immediately. The group started backing toward their cars, but I wasn't finished. I have the entire conversation recorded on my security system. I continued into the phone. They've made specific threats against a minor child and attempted extortion. Monica was running now, followed by the others. Car doors slammed, engines started, and they were gone within 30 seconds. But it was too late. The damage was done, and this time it was irreversible. The police arrived within 5 minutes, followed shortly by Sarah, who'd heard about the confrontation through the neighborhood grapevine. We spent 2 hours going through the security footage, documenting every threat, every admission, every piece of evidence that would be needed for the criminal charges. This is more than enough for arrest warrants, Officer Martinez told me as we reviewed the recordings. Extortion, criminal threats against a minor, conspiracy. They're looking at serious jail time. What about my daughter's safety? We'll have patrol cars in the area, and we're issuing emergency restraining orders against all of them. If any of them come within 500 feet of you, your daughter, or your property, they'll be arrested immediately. Sarah put a hand on my shoulder. It's over, Dave. They've destroyed themselves completely this time. She was right. By threatening Ellie, Monica had crossed the one line that guaranteed her complete destruction. No judge would ever give her custody now. No lawyer would represent her, and no amount of manipulation could explain away a recorded threat against a child. The arrest came the next morning. Monica, Greg, Carla, Jamie, and both men were taken into custody on multiple felony charges. The local news picked up the story, and by evening, the entire region knew about the Lakeview affair scandal that had ended with criminal threats against a 12-year-old girl. I picked Ellie up from school that afternoon and told her what had happened. So Mom's in jail? She asked. For now, yes. Good, she said simply. Maybe now she'll learn that actions have consequences. Out of the mouths of babes. 3 months later, Monica pled guilty to reduced charges and was sentenced to 2 years probation and mandatory counseling. Greg got a similar sentence, plus a hefty fine and community service. Carla and Jamie were charged as accessories and received lighter sentences, but their real estate licenses were revoked permanently. The custody case was resolved without a trial. Monica's parental rights were terminated based on her criminal conviction and the evidence of her threats against Ellie. I was awarded full custody with no visitation rights for Monica until Ellie turned 18 and could decide for herself. Sarah's divorce was finalized around the same time. She got the house, the cabin, most of the assets, and a very generous alimony settlement. Greg was left with his Corvette and a mountain of legal debt. The last I heard, Monica was working at a discount store in a town 50 miles away, living in a studio apartment and trying to rebuild her life from nothing. Greg had moved back in with his elderly mother and was doing odd jobs for cash. As for me, I kept my house, my job, my daughter, and my self-respect. I also gained something I hadn't expected, a reputation in Lakeview as someone you definitely didn't want to cross. Mrs. Roush still waves when I drive by, and she always has the latest gossip about Monica and Greg's continued struggles. Pete still comes by to help with electrical projects and to marvel at how completely we destroyed our enemies without breaking a single law. You know, he said one evening as we worked on rewiring my kitchen, I always knew you were good with electrical problems. I just never realized how good you were with human problems, too. Same principles, I replied. Find the short circuit, trace it back to its source, then fix it permanently. And that's exactly what I did. Monica and Greg thought they could destroy my family and get away with it. Instead, they learned that some circuits, once broken, can never be repaired.